Okay, so welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Pam. All right, let's make sure it's working here. Boom. All right, well, I appreciate the time, and I appreciate you folks dialing in. This morning here in California, I wanted to talk about the path to autonomous car sharing. So this is a bit of a forward-looking talk. It's designed mostly to, get you thinking about what comes next. In all of the discussions that I have with automotive OEMs, talking to them about making vehicles, sharing ready, it seems as though the industry, when they think about the future vehicles and sharing, they think about autonomous ride hailing. And, we think there's an opportunity, especially for folks in the car sharing business, to morph into autonomous car sharing companies, which we can talk about in a bit. So the whole context for this, and we know autonomous is coming. We've seen, these triple disruptions, which are on-demand EVs and autonomous coming together. Each one of these things is a very powerful transformation or disruption in their own right. The on-demand revolution that we've seen with Uber and Lyft and other companies really is, convenient, but it's expensive. The EV movement that's coming really helps drive down the cost of operating a vehicle, sometimes up to 10 cents per mile cheaper, especially because you don't need the internal combustion engine, which is a source of pretty high maintenance. And then, autonomous, which we think of as this, radical transformative technology, if it didn't have the on-demand element, autonomous could actually be considered almost a really powerful cruise control. In and of itself, making the individual, owner of the vehicle more comfortable as the car drove them places. But the on-demand element really allows vehicles to be shared. And of course, the thing that we are all focused on in the car sharing industry is letting multiple people use a single vehicle, trying to get beyond the 4% utilization rate of a private vehicle ownership. Here in San Francisco, it's about, every other car seems to have an Uber or a Lyft sticker. So you would think that the whole world has adopted new mobility, but it turns out that in 2018, we're still at about 1% total passenger miles traveled are with new mobility services like car sharing and ride sharing. The expectation is that this is in North America and in Europe, the expectation is that mobility as a service will hit about 1/3 of all passenger miles. If this were China, it would be about 1/2 of all passenger miles. The growth here, and again, I wanted to set this up front for some initial context, but the prediction, at least by PricewaterhouseCoopers, is that the autonomous mobility is what's going to end up driving up these utilization rates, because it brings the cost of new mobility way down. I mean, the typical driver in a ride-hailing service is about 75% of the total cost. The makeup of vehicle sales, I think, is going to start reflecting this. And as car sharing operators, you folks are in an amazing and extraordinary position because you understand and are, the wave of the future. If you look at this chart, the gray bars are the percent of vehicles sold in urban areas in North America to private personal ownership or private vehicle ownership. The green bars are vehicles that are being sold, projected to be sold into mobility services. You can see somewhere in the next 10 years, there'll be more vehicles sold into fleets like yours than to private individuals. that's a dramatic change, and we'll see we'll see that the ability to pull together a fleet and maintain it is going to become a competitive advantage for growing the service in the future. I think that one of the most telling signs here too is if you compare the gray bars is the market capitalization of all of the OEMs in the world, the automotive OEMs, and it's about $1 trillion today. In the future, it'll 2030, so 12 years from now, it'll be up some to 1.4 trillion. This is for their business of selling vehicles, but the mobility services is where all the value is going to be created, and that's up to $9 trillion of market cap, driven off of an expectation that there'll be about $1 trillion worth of revenue coming from mobility services around the globe. If we, think about this evolution, from vehicle ownership, which has been around for 100 years, to car sharing, which has been around for, 15, 18 years, and then ride sharing, which has started more recently. I think everybody's expectation, including a lot of the folks in the car share industry, is how am I going to get to this autonomous ride hailing, which is really what we anticipate. When autonomous vehicles come of age, is there a difference between car sharing and ride sharing? Not really, because why walk to a car when the car can come pick you up? So it'll have many things in common with the car sharing fleets today, because unlike what Uber and Lyft do, where their core competency is recruiting and managing drivers, in the car sharing experience, this is really about owning and servicing a fleet of vehicles. These autonomous ride hailing fleets will all be operator owned. The whole notion of people using their own vehicles, very expensive level 4 vehicles with autonomous technology, and then just using them to cart people around, is one that doesn't make sense in this future. These are more sophisticated beasts. The car sharing fleets are the ones that we anticipate are in an amazing position to morph into becoming these autonomous ride-hailing experiences. So if autonomous is the future of car sharing, how do we get there? And it's certainly, I think there's some incremental steps that we should be thinking about. So autonomous driving, everybody thinks of level 5. Level 5 is the part where the vehicles essentially can drive themselves anywhere there's a road, under any weather conditions, and become essentially a full human replacement. That's years and years and years off. Level 4 autonomous is where within geofenced areas, say within a city, downtown, where the maps are extremely precise and where the curbs are and the lanes are. There's already Waymo has been very successful in getting fleets of vehicles out in cities in the south and the southwest, where the lanes are well marked, the weather is quite nice. The biggest concern is that maybe a sandstorm will come up and clog the sensors, requiring the vehicle to get some service. So in low speed conditions, where most urban areas with level 4 autonomous, and potentially without any passengers in the vehicle, we've got technology that can be applied to the car sharing space. I think one of the key elements of managing any free floating car sharing is keeping the vehicles in a place where people want them. So understanding the map, the typical usage patterns, and realizing that this vehicle in its current location is probably not going to be rented for another 6 to 8 hours. If it were repositioned in a high traffic area, like by a public transit. I mean, I think everybody understands with free floating, the need to move vehicles is a very important one. If the vehicles that you have in car sharing have this low speed urban area, much cheaper form of autonomous driving technology built into it, you can use these to essentially at night reposition every vehicle in the fleet to an optimum place in the city. So this has a benefit that it's late at night when it's much simpler. The streets don't have the same traffic. These vehicles can drive themselves and park themselves in spots where the customers are going to be happy to find them in the morning. And that's the kind of thing that'll certainly improve the customer satisfaction and improve, vehicle utilization. Certainly within fleet operations, our experience is that rebalancing is one of the key opportunities. Essentially, we consider it, 40% of all of the total cost of keeping a free-floating car sharing service running. So making sure that we can use, instead of paying a driver to go to the car, be dropped off at the car, and then, $20, $25 to have them move the car. This is money that every day, you can potentially save with autonomous vehicles in this sort of low speed, no passenger use case. And the goal here is that, you optimize your fleet operations, being able to save considerable costs and increasing the customer sat because the vehicles are where they're wanted. I think we understand that in the future, these fleets are going to be electric. Today, with some of the lower range cars, they're very expensive to operate if they've got, less than 100-mile range. There's range anxiety the customers have. There's the cost of having to send somebody to the vehicles and move them to charging stations. Unlike a car that has low gas levels, a customer understands how to put gas in their own car and they're used to doing it themselves. So, there's certainly the possibility of incentivizing a customer to refill a petrol vehicle. But in the case of an EV, it's a much longer charging cycle. Fortunately, the battery technologies have gone way up, and our fleets of vehicles now routinely can get charged every third day. But the goal is if you want a fleet where the vehicles are always fully charged, being able to equip them with autonomous technology, and again, have them in late at night, very low demand areas, go to a charging center where they can be charged and then sent back on their way to have to the optimum location for fleet rebalancing. And so, this also not only saves money having to have a higher availability of cars in your fleet. They're never necessarily taken out of service because they have a low charge level. Also, you'll end up with a higher customer sat. And then you start to think about it. Okay, those are both middle of the night scenarios, no people in them. But what are some of the big drawbacks of car sharing versus ride hailing? I think a lot of people, I think the biggest issue is folks don't like the worry of having to park their car when they get to their destination. And oftentimes the other concern is, there's not a car within simple walking distance. So if you can take that autonomous technology and use it to eliminate walking to the cars by delivering the vehicle to a driver, the driver then hops in the driver's seat, drives themselves to the destination, and instead of circling around hunting for parking, they could, pull over, get out of the car, and end their ride, and the vehicle then has the ability to sort of take off and find its own parking or go back to a central location. These are certainly daytime use cases, making them potentially a bit harder to achieve. But one of the things that all of these use cases have in common is that the vehicle is not being used to autonomously drive a passenger from point A to point B. So the regulations around car sharing, where you've got car sharing permits to operate in a city, and those are very different than ride sharing permits, where in many countries car sharing is highly encouraged and allowed, and ride sharing is something that's frowned upon. So there's, I think the important thing here is that in the industry, autonomous shared vehicles is synonymous with autonomous ride hailing. And I think in the car sharing business, while fleet owners are incredibly appropriately positioned to be the leaders in autonomous ride hailing, one of the the key ways is to start adding autonomous to create a much more efficient autonomous car sharing fleet, which I think most folks don't mind the driving from A to B if it means that they can save money over having a driven car take them around, and certainly B, if it solves the issue of having to the valet delivery, not having to walk to a car, not having to park a car. This is a dramatic game changer for the car sharing value proposition. So really, autonomous use cases applied to car sharing is autonomous car sharing. It's a term that we don't hear much in the industry. Transporting passengers, then makes it autonomous ride hailing, and that's a very different set of regulations. I think when you think about, what does a car sharing platform that supports autonomous look like, you'll find that it has to have elements of car sharing, but then also needs elements of ride sharing. So certainly car sharing, all the things that you do for car sharing fleets are important. Being able to give people, vehicle access. So when the vehicle pulls up, if it's a valet delivery, you have the ability to validate that the customers who they say they are using their smartphone. All the things you do for fleet operations and maintenance are key. But then the ride sharing technology, in terms of how do you dispatch a vehicle, where does it go next? What's the best way for it to get there? Routing algorithms, as well as the demand prediction of where the people will want to be picked up or have a car delivered to them, are all key elements of a ride-sharing platform. And, together those things combine into having the ability to have autonomous car sharing. Some of the elements of complete autonomous car sharing experience, well, there's obviously there's the vehicles. At Ridecell, we have a division called Oro. They are focused on the autonomous technology and level 4 car conversions for people to get started now in understanding how an autonomous vehicle would fit into their fleet. And then you need an autonomous operations platform. This is the part of the software that helps the fleet owners understand how to keep these autonomous vehicles operating well, because unlike a ride hailing service where there's a driver in the car, there are situations where the vehicle has to be able to perform its own maintenance, has to be able to call for help, has to be able to pull into a service bay and have the people there know that the vehicle's coming and what kind of work needs to be done. And then finally, the experience, the app experience also should be upgraded from just a classic car sharing experience to an autonomous car sharing use cases. So the, understanding and having the ability to do car sharing, having an ops engine for maintenance, scheduling, and ticketing, and then the ability, if your city allows it, to start experimenting with ride sharing, because that's, if the end game, when the long game is after autonomous car sharing, it's probably the next step will be autonomous ride hailing. And so understanding how to get into the ride sharing business is an important piece too. Certainly the goal is to be able to choose a platform that's got all of these elements so that you can do free floating car sharing, station-based car sharing, residential car sharing, on-demand car rental with delivery, ride sharing, and start to pilot and test autonomous fleets. The end-to-end solution that you would expect for a typical car sharing platform, has not just the full suite of software and apps that you need. You need a driver's app if you are in the ride-hailing business, and the customer's app. But you also shouldn't be dependent upon the supplier to create all the features necessary for you to run your service. So the APIs become a really important way. So if you would like to develop a differentiation, like a proprietary pricing model, depending upon distance from the vehicle, being able to offer discounts, all of these are possible with a platform that has APIs that allow you to upgrade and overwrite all the built-in native functionality. Certainly, we think that in terms of maturing as a car sharing business, having the ability to write and own your own app becomes also a very critical element of how do you move into the next generation of new mobility services. Certainly, taking a white label app isn't necessarily the most expedient way to develop your own unique experience. But having the ability to do active fleet management, integration with CRM systems, so that the minute somebody misses their reservation, you have the ability to not just send them a push notification, but a follow-up email with a survey, integrating into a Lean Plum or a Salesforce experience. Obviously, the other elements of understanding what do you need for vehicle access, safety, and then being able to manage the vendors that are involved in keeping these vehicles on the road is different when you're having your own car sharing fleet that is driven versus one which is autonomous. And so adding in an autonomous operations suite is an important piece to think about. Being able to direct vehicles to operations depots, because autonomous vehicles, while they're really good at being taught how to get from A to B, they don't know anything about what to do when the check engine light comes on or when they break down. And so having an autonomous operations platform that gives these vehicles the intelligence to know how to schedule their own routine maintenance, how to handle unexpected emergency conditions, as well as keeping themselves clean and fit for subsequent riders. So being able to send emergency support vehicles, and these support vehicles, like if the car has to get towed for some reason, they're going to get to the car. There's nobody, the car's locked, there's nobody in the car. So how do they get in? Well, they use the same experience that the customer would use, which is going to the app on their phone, which is part of the service vehicle app, and press the unlock button and get in the vehicle and put it in neutral, put it on the tow flatbed. So being able to grant vehicle access, and then also this operations engine, one of the important things if you have an autonomous vehicle is that you have to do compliance reporting. So this is another layer of how the overall ops center, is upgraded to take advantage of these situations. It's part of the whole active fleet management experience that you need to be able to track, dispatch, and optimize this on-demand workforce for maintenance kind of jobs. So being able to understand the workers that have these apps that are contracted, who's online, who should receive the request. In the screen, we've got dispatch or an ability for someone to accept or reject a cleaning request for a vehicle that's 3.2 miles away. It's going to take them 18 minutes to get there. It has a whole list of things they're expected to do. Clean the exterior, clean the interior, certainly cleaning the top-mounted sensors. These are all things that are critical when you are keeping an autonomous fleet in service. And this isn't just something that's particular to autonomous vehicles. They also work for regular driven vehicles. And in fact, this active fleet management portion of what we've developed is something that we've incorporated into customers that aren't using Ridecell for their overall car sharing app experience. So it's a nice complementary additive product to help increase the efficiency and really manage the vendors that are out there servicing the fleets. The back-end operations center where you can manage and automate cleaning, incident checks, use it for lost and found, even stranded user rescue are all the kinds of tasks that we've been able to integrate to vendors at an API level. Just a little bit about the RO vehicles. It's the world's first autonomous driving platform that's optimized for autonomous car sharing. This is built on proven autonomous driving tech. We've had RO tech being used in vehicles at the Santa Clara University. It's run for over a year, 3,000 passengers, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, with level 4 autonomous use cases for, things like first and last mile transport, delivery, and logistics. So just, slide about Ridecell. We are a company that was founded in 2009. The focus is on new mobility. Ridecell means get a ride with your cell phone. So we've really been focused on this use case now for almost 10 years. We've delivered over 25 million rides and rentals based in San Francisco with 130 employees. Recently raised $28 million in a Series B with customers like BMW powering their Reach now, or AAA powering their free-floating car sharing service. We power Renault and Ferrovial's service in Madrid called Zity, as well as 15 other car sharing and ride-hailing customers with investors from BMW, Khosla, Y Combinator, as well as real folks from the industry like Penske, the largest North American dealer group in the world, Cox Automotive, one of the most successful dealer services organizations. Denso is the tier 1, so is Mitsui, and then Deutsche Bahn as well. Really, the focus is you start to think about your next generation autonomous car sharing service, and you're thinking about how do I get my utilization rates for my car sharing fleet, into the mid upper 30 percentile. You can't do that just by powering free floating car sharing. You need to run multiple different business models on that one fleet of vehicles that allows you to sort of stack the different peak utilization times. And you need to run that based upon a new mobility cloud that allows you to start with all of the basics taken care of, all the business models built in, and having you have the ability to, overwrite individual features and create your own app so that you can have a very differentiated service without having to start from scratch. This mobility cloud is very similar to when people start businesses that involve, websites and enterprise solutions. Nobody goes into the, online and buys hardware and takes it into a data center and wires it up with load balancers. That's just starting from scratch. Instead, people use Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. So this is now the model that we've developed at Ridecell that really lets you focus on starting with all the use cases built in and then overriding the technology. So really, for your consideration, begin planning to experiment mixing in autonomous test vehicles into your fleet. Consider next generation car sharing fleet and tech that runs car sharing and autonomous ride sharing. And certainly, if you'd like to talk more, you can reach out to me. I'm Mark T at Ridecell, or just send a note to info@ridecell.com to find out more about autonomous car sharing. So we are Ridecell, and we're the intelligent platform for new mobility services. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, Mark, thank you so much. I'm impressed and kind of I'm intrigued and I'm excited about the future as being a mobility geek and a car sharing organization founder myself. So I'm wondering now if we can take some questions and or even some discussion points that you want Mark to comment on. If you just have a question, please take it, put it in the question section on the technology. And the first question actually is, will this PowerPoint be shared? And yes, it will. We will share with all the people who are on the session right now. And I'll start off the questions because I'm my mind is going a million miles now with all the things that you talked about. You talked about the consumer experience, and you talked about an operator's experience, and it seems to me that the technology that you are creating and others, and this whole disruption is like on the forefront and is leading this whole new business model. But yet cities are not prepared, it seems, for what is coming. And what is your experience with that? How involved do we have to be with our cities around, right now with car sharing organizations, we have to collaborate with our cities. We have to really get them to understand the importance of car sharing and their mandates to reduce personal use vehicles and that sort of thing. And now we're going to have to go to them and say, okay, now here's the next thing. And they're not even up on the first thing in a lot of cities, which is what we're going to touch on, or actually we're going to talk a lot about in the conference coming up. So what is your comment on that, Mark?
So it's the fact that car sharing companies in the car sharing business today that have relationships with cities is a huge competitive advantage for these companies to be well positioned to capitalize on that in the future. If you just look at a recent example, we had the whole scooter sharing in San Francisco, when companies just jumped in and covered the streets with these scooters. Line Bike had thousands, and the city put the brakes on it and said, hey, you have to apply for permits, and all of them were taken off the roads. And when they were done, they issued 2 permits. One of them was to scoot, in response to the fact that, rewarding them for having been good citizens and having worked with the city, having established a very successful free-floating model, the only free-floating service of a motorized vehicle. And so it's, there were 18 highly funded, successful, even billion-dollar market cap companies that tried to enter this market, and they were shut out because there was an incumbent here that had a relationship with the city, that had been collaborating, and they were prepared to take advantage of what came next. So this is the same situation that can apply to the car sharing operators. Getting in, talking to them about adding autonomous, understanding what the regulations are. I don't think that anyone that is thinking about how autonomous plays with ride sharing. Understanding there's commercial permits for autonomous, which means you can take people around in the vehicles, paying customers. There's permits, there's like 3 layers of permits. The second layer of permit doesn't allow you to take a paying customer around, but it does allow you to drive the vehicles around the city. So that's a much easier permit to get. And potentially getting this permit that allows you to use the cars late at night without driving passengers around means that you can get your autonomous experience taking place in the city where you operate without having to wait for all the extra regulations that go into being in a situation where you move a passenger around. So it's, being able to capitalize on this opportunity like Scoot did meant that, Scoot had a scooter sharing program in the works and saw this opportunity and jumped on it. And they were rewarded for their experience with local government.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Are there, again, if you have any questions, please put it in the question section, and I'll repeat the question for Mark. I have another question in the meantime, and that is, like, will the autonomous transportation be accessible and economical for everyone? Like, what are the best business models in the future of transport? Like, as a consumer, how will I pay for this? As an organization, who will own the fleet? What's the business model going to look like?
Again, I think most people, and probably in the long run, autonomous transportation will be in the form of autonomous ride hailing. And we don't call it ride sharing anymore when you're not sharing a car with a driver or sharing the driver's car personal vehicle. It's the sharing part's over. I mean, maybe you're sharing a vehicle, but we don't think of bus sharing because all of us sit on the bus at the same time. So the expectation is autonomous ride hailing will get down to roughly 35 cents a mile, and maybe 30 cents depending upon the scale. And that's an all electric vehicle. That's in an area where there's high density, so downtown, so you're not having to travel far to pick somebody up. So in urban areas, this is at least half the cost of using your own car. Your own car is estimated at about 65 cents a mile when you consider you have to pay to park it, have it washed, have it maintained, have it insured, the depreciation, you have to buy the vehicle. All those things add up. So on a per mile basis, on average, it's twice as expensive. So at that point, really this brings usage of a private vehicle into the realm where it's affordable to people who may not be able to afford a car at all. In North America, we view getting driven around in an autonomous vehicle as sort of this, well, I don't want to give up my car. But in other parts of the world, these vehicles, they don't have a car, and they're walking or riding their bicycle the mile and a half to the bus depot in order to take a bus or a train somewhere. And we've, in the same way that in Southeast Asia, nobody had telephones, and then cell phones came about, and instead of the cell phone being a replacement for your landline, like we all experienced in North America, this was people's first ability to communicate with phones. This is the similar level disruption, which will bring access to private vehicles into a whole category of consumers that could never think about owning a vehicle, never had the money to pay up front for a car that they'll use over time.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a question, and it seems that Uber and other companies like them are a better fit to be the autonomous mobility. What is the car sharing advantage compared to them?
Certainly, and that's the thing. When you look at what's Uber good at, they're good at recruiting and retaining drivers. When autonomous mobility comes, these fleets of vehicles will be owned by the autonomous mobility fleet operator. All of the experience that car sharing operators have in terms of relationships with companies that service the vehicles, companies that will come out to the cars and clean them, experience with getting insurance for this kind of thing. That's all experience. And in fact, we just talked about the experience of also understanding what the city regulations. These are all benefits that an Uber doesn't have. And so when the switching costs from Uber to another autonomous mobility service in the future are incredibly low. And people have switched from Uber to Lyft. You've switched back. There's no loyalty programs built into either of them. It's just a matter of downloading an app and provisioning yourself, which takes 2 minutes. So we think that much like the airline industry, where there isn't two airlines that service an entire city or region. There's lots of different airlines: international airlines, value airlines, family airlines, business airlines, budget airlines, and there's affiliations between airlines so that you can buy a ticket and have the first leg covered by the ticket brand, and then the next leg would be covered by, say, Lufthansa if you're flying on United. So there's the world will evolve, and the car sharing operators, I think I'm most excited for them because they're in an amazing place with the experience in owning fleets, experience in maintaining and managing them, and servicing them. It's all about taking that experience and leveraging it into the next phase. One reason why the companies that are talking to us about getting into mobility, we have the ability. We used to run Summon, which was a competitor to Uber and Lyft. We had 2,500 drivers. We have a full featured ride-hailing platform that we power. Most of the companies we talk to want to start their business as car sharing companies because they understand they need to figure out how do they keep these fleets on the road before they figure out how to make cars that drive themselves around.
Exactly. Okay. We have another question. If car ownership is twice the price of an EV ride-hailing service, where does the $9 trillion mass market cap come from? What are the services the customers are paying at the moment that will be replaced by mass mobility as a service?
Yeah. So when you buy your own car, you make the decision for who do you buy the insurance from, who does the maintenance, where do you get it cleaned, when there's an accident, where does the collision, what shop do you use for collision? Those are all, there's a huge multitude of industries. Who tows it when it breaks down? Oh, I belong to AAA. When I get mobility as a service, I get all of those industries rolled up into one check. So I pay them for the ride, and anything that goes wrong, the towing, the cleaning, the maintenance, the charging, the fuel, all of that is now under the control of the mobility service operator. So they may even decide to self-insure or just go straight to like Munich Re for reinsurance, something that we as customers end customers can't do. So there are, in the same way that this the $9 trillion market cap is based off of $1 trillion of revenue, so it's a 9x multiple. The revenue is money that would have been spent on those multitude of services that I'm now no longer spending. If I don't have a car, I'm canceling my auto insurance. So it's really the disruption that affects much more than the automotive OEMs. It's something that will disrupt all the adjacent industries, which is why AAA, for instance, came to us and said, hey, we realize that if private vehicle ownership goes away, nobody needs an auto club. And in fact, with cars being more reliable, there's less of a value proposition anyhow. We want to get into a business that has a future, and we think new mobility is it. So we're powering their car sharing service in the San Francisco Bay Area.
And there's more than one. We have a couple of members of the Car Sharing Association of insurance companies who have actually started car sharing operations in light of the current situation and the future. So they do see the writing on the wall. I have time for one more question, and I have my staff who are listening to this as well. And one of the questions is getting back to the terms, ride sharing and ride hailing. Does the distinction still matter? Is it a point worth clarifying when we're dealing with regulators, when we're trying to communicate the car sharing offer right now? Like, how do we make sure that that car sharing profile is raised up as as part of the answer towards transition, rather than, I don't, it seems like we're in a lot of competition with the ride hailing and the operators right now. So it's like, how do we as a car sharing industry really, get the terms distinction and our regulators and our communication to consumers? How do we make that happen?
Yeah, a couple things. Probably the thing that will make the cities take notice, especially as expansion plans are coming, and the technology is there, is I'm talking about shared fleets of EVs. In the past, the EV in a car sharing fleet was really expensive to maintain because they were always requiring someone to move them to a charging station. With these 250-mile range Chevy, Bolts or Renault Zoe, the economics of running these things have changed dramatically. Consumer acceptance of having a long-range vehicle means they can do more. And so if you are, if the goal is to expand, being prepared and understanding how to have a fleet of electric vehicles will really go a long way to getting the cities to understand this is not only is it going to take 10 cars off the road, it'll help them push up against some of the resistance, which are, hey, these cars are taking up my parking spots. You're adding cars to the city, not taking them out. So, many cities like San Francisco still don't offer free-floating car sharing, for instance, as an option. If somebody were to come with a value proposition of, hey, these are all long-range EVs, I think that would potentially be the thing that helps, cut the Gordian knot.
Right. Okay. Well, we don't have any more. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. No, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited for Ridecell to participate in the CSA conference coming up next month. And thank you so much, Pam, for everything you've done.
Oh, listen, Mark, the pleasure was mine, and I want to thank you and Ridecell, of course, for being a gold sponsor for the car sharing industry conference coming up in October in Paris. And so your facilitation of that and supporting the car sharing industry in that way is an indicator of your belief and how this is going to evolve. And I appreciate that. I want to invite everybody online to go and see our website, carsharing.org, which is our industry website, and that will take you to the conference and the program. And you'll also see the benefits of joining the Car Share Association. And I want to thank Deep T from your staff for helping to organize this. And I will see you all in Paris. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.